members. You cannot simply say personnel matters.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you very much. What is the MS?
So you just read this, and then you're gonna do personnel.
Mutual respect, Ms. Hayes.
Pursuant to MRSA 405-6A, we're discussing the superintendent's evaluation in executive session. Thank you. Laura, do you want to sit here?
That's not very nice.
Well, I'm sorry.
Ms. Hayes, are you evaluating,
Please don't do
are you evaluating the superintendent, or are you simply discussing process and procedure? That makes a difference.
We're discussing anything concerning the superintendent. We're not discussing policy and procedure at this time.
You will not be discussing an
We're
executive...
not discussing policy and procedure
Then
at
please
this time,
state,
Laura.
then are you evaluating the superintendent at this time in
No,
executive
we're
session?
not. We're discussing issues. Thank you.
I'm sorry, what are the issues?
I'm sorry. We're going into executive session to discuss the issues.
And on the record, I need it to state clearly what the issues are you will be discussing.
The superintendent of schools, personnel matters.
And I asked you, what personnel matters? You have to state specifically.
We're discussing personnel matters of the superintendent of school relevant to 405-6A.
Okay, I would like to
Paper,
request
please. Can
that
I-
there be minutes taken in the executive session,
There'll be
please.
no minutes taken into the executive session per attorney. Thank you. So could I please have a motion to go into executive session? Second, please. All in favor? Thank you. Let's go. We'll be out in about an hour. Thank you. ready?
We ran 6 miles, I think we're done. He said, I'll tell you when you're done. 40 more
I
push-ups.
call this meeting of the Auburn School Department.
Mike.
Thank you. I call this meeting of the Auburn School Committee in session at this time. The first order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Yep. If I get hurt here, I could probably get one.
I'll have introductions, starting over here with Elfrida.
Elfrida Fournier, Mayor's Representative, City Councilor Ward 4, and School Committee.
Dan Poisson, Ward 5.
Pat Gaudier at large.
Katie Ronan, Superintendent.
Bonnie Hayes, Ward 2.
Faith Fontaine at large.
Brian Belknap, Ward 4.
Bob Manili, Ward 1.
Thank you very much. I'd like to communicate to everybody that Mr. Kendall will not be here, probably will not be here in the foreseeable future. He did have an accident. He is in the hospital. He is going to be okay, but he just needs to go through the hospital procedure and probably some rehab on it. So he's okay, so we're going to proceed as he would, if not. So let's start with here. The first thing is the consent agenda. Oh, communications. Let's go back to communications. Does anybody have any communications that they want to share with us?
I just have one communication from a constituent, and I'm going to pass it along to the superintendent. Has to do with recess and in the morning. Thank you.
Anybody else? I have a constituent approached me and wanted to know if I knew where Edward Little was buried. And I kind of scratched my head and I said, I don't know, tell me. Oak Hill Cemetery. His grave is dated 1865. That's when the stone was erected. He died before then. His body was transported to Oak Hill Cemetery. The stone is eroding, and it's a mess. And I'm hoping, Mr. Anir, that we can maybe get a community project from the high school to at least wash the stone and see what we need to do to keep it going, especially where we're building a new high school in his name. So that constituent was very concerned that this was eroding and would hope that somebody would do something about it. So that's,
I know a citizen has reached out to the city manager,
yes.
so, yeah.
Yes, so the city manager knows about it, we know about it, and hopefully it can be a no-cost project. It's a project that doesn't require maybe a little blasting, power washing on it, but not with an acid, because the stone is probably made out of limestone, and acid will erode the limestone. So going from there, I am asking approval of the agenda, please.
I move to approve the agenda, but I have an addition.
Okay.
I would like to add another item, and that is to talk about the superintendent's evaluation,
The procedures.
the procedures and policies and process.
Procedures in the process. And can we add that just before the superintendent's report? Is that all right for everybody?
Yep.
All right, that's a motion. I need a second on it.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you very much. We'll do that just before the superintendent's report. Okay. Approval of minutes, that was part of the consent agenda, so we've done that. Public participation, this is the time.
I
that
know
the-
you have to move and approve the consent agenda. It's
Oh,
all right.
I'm sorry.
I know.
All right, approval of the consent agenda with the addition.
With the addition.
Right, so moved.
Ayes, so moved, aye. Yeah.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Okay. Moving on. Public participation. At this time, anybody can come up to the microphone and address the school committee. We ask you to be respectful. Please give your name and your address, and please limit it to 3 minutes, and we'll move on from there.
About something not on the agenda. It's okay, it's a lot.
Okay, so we're not speaking at public participation on anything that is on the agenda. So on the agenda is the planning and development, the teacher retention rates, and we'll speak to that later, okay, when we take that up. And then we're not going to speak to the policies and procedures until we take that up. We'll have time after each item to have public participation on. Okay, so please come forward, state your name and address.
My name is Laura Garcia. I reside at 20 Skillings Corner Road. I have 2 daughters in the Auburn School Department, schools. I was sent the Auburn 2030 vision by a teacher that said, hot off the presses, here's the Auburn Vision 2030. And I do know from prior school committee meetings that you folks have reviewed that and that it was approved by you and put forth. And I also know that I attended a forum in May, not this last May, but the May before, that was about Vision 2030, and we were supposed to say what we wanted as a community. What I would like to say is I was reading down through the vision, and I got to the section on our community. And it stated that our community would show mutual respect. So I stopped and I thought, okay, mutual respect, that means it's a two-way street. So I thought, okay, so who are they talking about showing mutual respect to? Because there is no other place in the vision where mutual respect is present. So who are we talking about? So I went back and again looked at the categories, and then I looked at the staff, our staff, and our community will do, our staff will do, our community will do. But what occurred to me, again, in reviewing this, is that your 2030 vision doesn't include what the leadership is going to do. It's completely absent. Mm-hmm. Our staff will do this. Our community will do this. It's your vision of what Auburn School Department is. But yet there's nothing to talk about how the leadership is going to conduct itself, what we can expect. You've listed what you expect of the community, but there's nothing there to say that, you know, the leadership will conduct itself with transparency, accountability, fiscal responsibility, that it will build relationships and show mutual respect for the community, that it will work with students and parents and teachers to try to achieve the best interest of our children and excellence. So I would like to see the school committee add something more to the vision that speaks to what we can expect from the leadership in implementing your vision going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm Corinne McWiggin, and I live at 444 Turner Street. I just quickly wanted to discuss something that the community hasn't brought forth. I know you talked about it previously. It was the article in the Boston Globe. It was jarring, but it was also, there was some bias within the way that the author wrote it. The author came looking for a particular story and found it. But that being said, I feel there is a definite problem. The problem is not just in EL, it's our whole community. My daughter, who is a sophomore at EL, was in one of the focus groups discussed in the article. When she came home after participating in this group, she felt that the questions were leading. When she would answer a question, they would say, "Well, are you sure?" And she thought, well, yeah, I was. And she felt kind of gaslighted. But I didn't just stop it there when I talked to her about it. I took the time to break down why she felt that way. We discussed filters and the lenses we use every day, our own perceptions, her perceptions, others' perceptions, our own white privilege, and how she can help, how she herself can help to help others see others' views and how they experience their lives. We have deep, excuse me. We spoke about empathy, and that's something our community is lacking. We live in our own bubbles. Everyone lives in our own bubbles and our own in our own ways, especially teenagers. There is a problem, and I hope more families and community members, teachers, administrators, ask the tough questions and not just have a focus group that has all the honor students, and that's what my daughter said. It's like, why are they asking me? Why were there not more? It wasn't a broad brush in her group. But we need more dialogue, and we need to ask the tough questions, and we need to see our own infallibilities and our own reasons why this happened. It was in Boston. I mean, he could have looked anywhere, at any school in Boston, but he chose us. So how can we make it better?
Thank you very much. Next.
And just to make the community aware, on the first school committee meeting in October at 6, Steve Wessel, who hosted those focus groups, will be here to explain what the plan is for this year, and that will be in workshops so the community, school committee members can ask questions and clarify what will be the groups and what the work will be doing. So just to make you aware.
And some of us are members of Green Dot, and we have been in touch with the leaders of Green Dot, and we'll have a meeting with them to make them aware of what's happening too.
I understand that this issue was taken up at the workshop before school started at Edward Little. Is that true? Was there any discussion about what could teachers do to address the issue?
Well, Scott, that we can talk about that on the 2nd.
The reason I'm asking is because I was contacted by a teacher about how it was discussed. Actually, the fact that it wasn't discussed. That it was brought up, and that Superintendent Grondin and Principal Anir talked about how it made them feel. And that the teachers, there was no discussion about how we might make changes. There was no discussion about going forward or whether people thought. There was no dialogue, what Corinne just talked about. And I don't know whether you want to share with everybody what was done or whether I should.
I mean, share what was done at the
What you asked the teachers to do.
We're working on that, and Scott.
No, that day when you had the workshop, did you ask the teachers to put their thoughts and feelings on sticky notes about the article?
Yes.
What did you ask the teachers to do with those?
Well, it was a bigger, we're getting into dialogue.
Yes, we're not going to dialogue tonight, Laura. Why don't?
I hope you know that some teachers are watching, and this is part of leadership. Mm-hmm. The reality is that teachers were not happy with how that was handled. It was disrespectful to them. When you ask them to throw their feelings and their thoughts about that article in the trash can, it's telling them that their thoughts and feelings are garbage. And that doesn't help our morale among the teachers, nor does it address the issues that this very important article raised.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to speak at this time?
My name is Victoria Langelier. I live at 217 3rd Street, and I wanted to discuss something that's been brought up at the committee meetings before, which is the school lunch debt that we have. I know personally, being a busy mom of 2 little girls in the school department here, that sometimes confusion happens and bills don't get paid. My 10-year-old was handed a folded up piece of paper in her classroom saying that we owed $6 for school lunches as back pay. It's done for discretion, so the kids don't know, but they know. And every single kid that walked up in that classroom was singled out by their classmates because they all knew what was going on. So I implore you, those of you on the board and those of you that will be on the board eventually, that we look at a progressive way to handle this. The rec department has done a great job with providing scholarships from our community leaders so that kids can be kids and they can play sports. Kids should be kids and be able to eat lunch without having to get past a note and have their friends point fingers at them.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. No one else? I'm going to close the public participation at this time. And we'll go on to the next item on the agenda. Is, got it, is the evaluation process on it. It is a process. We do have a policy. We are going to follow the policy, and there is a timeline for the policy. So we're going to follow the timeline. Extras I can do. Anybody need any? Bob, do you have one?
Yes, yes.
Everybody? Okay, and are there extras up there?
No, they're right,
You can,
you have the
I already
copies.
have mine, so
We don't have enough for everyone, but
I already have my own copy, so if you want to share it.
Yeah, but this
Adam, do you want to just,
Pull the timelines on the
yeah,
back,
because I
okay.
have mine too.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah.
I think Michelle is handing out some too. Timeline.
This, we are going to begin this evaluation. We're going to begin this evaluation in September now on it, but this month, not today. We had a meeting scheduled for September 11th in executive session, and that is not going to be held on it. We have some work to do, some information to gather, and we're going to gather that information and go from there on it. The timeline will be followed. There will be there will be a survey that will be completed the first week in October. This part of the administration has it, and all the school board has it. That's the survey, the questionnaire survey. So that will be done in the first week in October and turned into it. We will put everything together, come up with common threads. Everybody will read the same information on it, and we'll go from there. We'll meet in October to summarize all that had turned into us on it. And then we'll follow through the first week in November on it. That's what our intent is. It is our obligation as a school committee to have an evaluation and a contract for the superintendent of schools on it. This board, that's their obligation to do that. So we'll follow the timeline, and this is the first time that the board has seen the timeline unless you've gone on to policies and procedures on it. So I'll give you a few minutes to look at it. And I'll be glad to read it all, but I think we're all not yet. The board hasn't finished, Laura. I'm sorry. Everybody glanced at it? Ready to go with it? Okay? We'll open it up to the floor first. Pat, do you want to discuss it first?
I would like to discuss it
I'm not going
first.
to comment.
Okay, so Alfreda, you want to discuss it first? Go ahead.
Right, I've done a lot of work on this, and I've sent emails back and forth, as you know, and I was concerned about two things, and one was the lack of process, and the other one was the lack of this being done as a team, and the rushing through all of this. And this is what I have been asking for, And I'm going to send something I had prepared for today because I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I do have to make sure that this is for public record, and I am going to read it, and I'm very happy to see this. I've given much thought to my duties and responsibilities as a school committee member for the past year and a half. I've always taken this role very seriously, much to your consternation, hoping to be a contributor toward improving the school system where my husband and I were employed and where my children attended, and my grandchild too. While on the school committee, I do my homework, I speak up, I ask questions, I expect to be engaged in policy making and not just rubber stamp what is put before me. I expect transparency, where everyone knows what we are doing, but find we are sorely lacking in this area, and that's transparency. That said, it frustrates and concerns me at this time that the most important responsibility I have, evaluating our school district superintendent, is flawed, cursory, and rushed through at lightning speed. There is no meaningful process and no opportunity to collect and participate as a committee to fulfill our duties as outlined in the current 2 policies. Chairman Kendall insists policy is being followed, and I wholeheartedly disagree. Regardless of how outdated our superintendent evaluation policies are, 1995 and 2002, these are what we are bound to follow. I've asked at committee meeting and in writing for discussion to ensue to establish a process to make the superintendent's evaluation more mindful and meaningful, and to clearly develop a process which includes all committee members' participation. I have asked to slow it down a bit, but have received, well, not now, but previous, but have not received acknowledgement either way. Instead, they're staying the course. Friday, our 5 strengths, 5 weaknesses are due regardless of the lack of process beforehand and absence of documentation on goals and progress. In the time I've been on the school committee, we have never met at 6-month intervals to discuss goals, progress towards these goals as well. So the rush, I'm asking, what's the rush? And I can say in all honesty that our teacher evaluation process far exceeds what we are expecting of our own school superintendent. We, the school committee, are the superintendent's employer. We are policymakers. Don't we want to do the best job possible in insisting on a process that will inform and clearly guide our superintendent to move toward excellence in the 2nd largest school district in Maine? There is so much more we need to do to bring our school system to excellence, but for now, I am focusing solely on and significantly concerned about our lack of process for the evaluation of the highest administrator in the Auburn School District. And I'm submitting this for the record to be made available to the public. And I thank you for recent occurrences that is going to make a difference and answers my concerns that I have just said. Thank you.
Thank you, Elfrida. Thank you, Elfrida.
Thank you very much.
You never got a copy of this?
Right here.
That's all right.
Oh, I've got an extra.
Did-
I just missed it. Pass that to her. Yeah, I've got an extra.
All right, so
I've got extras.
we all have copies, and we'll put that in the record.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. In the meantime, what we've said is that we're slowing it down, and we had decided to slow that down.
Love it.
Before this, okay, we had decided to slow that down. Mr. Kendall's not here, and I've decided to slow it down with our committee. So what we're doing is that we're not going to have the 5 questions, weaknesses, and what are strengths.
Thank you.
Due on September 6th. We will have that due later on as we get going. We're suspending September 11th meeting, which is going to be an executive session. We're suspending that, and we're going to give all the information that is needed for this on it. So we have heard, I think we've all felt uncomfortable, and including the superintendent, so we are taking and slowing the process down and doing it right. And we will be all accomplished by November on it.
Yep.
That's our timeline, that's our policy, and we'll all be accomplished by November. And then we will submit it. We need to have a superintendent on staff, or we need to let the superintendent know that she no longer is going to be employed, And we need to do that by December 31st to the state. So we are working on this. We're very slow and meticulous about this. I have taken this on as my project. And I have said that when Mr. Kendall comes back, it's my project. So we will go forth from there on it. There's no sense of changing horses in midstream.
Yeah.
So we'll go forth from there. Anybody else have any questions, Bob?
I agree with everything Alfreda said, but I do think that we have made progress tonight in righting the ship and following through with what you just stated here. I think we can do this in a good, straightforward way. And unfortunately, this committee, through lack of, I won't blame Mr. Kendall, but I can point the finger a little bit, that we did not follow policy in evaluating Katie.
You're
And
correct.
one last thing I had asked, and I'd like to say, which I said, I have nothing personally against Katie Grondin. I like her very much as an individual. She sometimes gives my crippled butt a ride home from meetings. But what matters to me most as a member of the school committee is I would like to see a spreadsheet prepared with all kinds of benchmarks for Auburn students and the Auburn school system to see where we compare to the rest of the state. And I would like nothing better to see that Auburn is number one in all of the categories. And hopefully we can work forward to getting closer to that.
Bob, thank you very much. I think we all agree with that we'd like to see Auburn as number one, and we're going to work towards that even harder. And I think it's important to note that when we see things on Zillow or whatever the other one was, Nosh or whatever it was, that does not reflect our community on it. It does not. So we need to proceed and go from there. Pat, do you have something to say? Anybody else? Faith? Okay.
Thank you very much. This is the right thing to do, and we're going in the right
It's the
direction.
right thing to do, and
Thank you.
we're going to continue doing this.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody, we'll open it up to the public now. The subject is policies and procedures and the timeline for the evaluation of the superintendent of schools. Please come and state your name and your address.
Laura Garcia, 20 Skillings Corner Road. I agree with Ms. Fournier and Mr. Meneely that this is the right thing to do. As a former employment law lawyer, we really need to have professional standards and expectations and have a process in place going forward. I would like to ask, was this followed ever?
Yes, it has been followed in years past.
When was the most recent
I'm not
time?
going to have a dialogue with you at this time, Laura. Please submit your questions, and we'll be glad to answer them.
Ms. Hayes, how long have you been on the board?
I have been on here a while.
I would like to have the instrument of assessment that is used and has been used made available to the public, please. I think it's very important for the public, there is an election in November, to know how long it's been since this policy and procedure has been followed. It's only fair to the public. This has nothing to do with Superintendent Grondin personally at all. This has to do with the school committee and how it's functioning or the dysfunction of the school committee. But if you were to represent the public and do right by our children, we have a right to know whether you are following the policies and procedures that you have said you would in representing us. I would encourage the school committee, whoever is in those seats after the November election, to actually review our policies and procedures with regard to the evaluation this fall. As Ms. Fournier said, we are bound by what has been previously adopted, but the job description was adopted in 1995. And we're in the middle of a huge project it seems like we need to revisit a few things and make sure that we are current on this. And I will say that I took the time to look at a few other school districts in Maine, and I found that they had adopted policies in 2009. So it seems that, different job descriptions in 2009, it seems that there should be also a process in place for revisiting perhaps maybe every 5 years and just checking that box and making sure that we're staying current. Thank you.
The next person, anybody else?
Good evening. I'm the Reverend Sarah Bartlett. I live at 107 Shepley Street. And I would just like to encourage and ask those in the school board, as you do this review, to please talk to us as constituents, talk to high school students, talk to the middle school students, find out what's going on for them, talk to teachers. Sometimes we as parents feel very left out of decision-making, like we're not valued, and so I would just like to ask that as you do this review process, that you reach out to those of us who are living on your neighborhoods and on your streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Somebody else?
Good evening. Dave Simpson, 302 Lake Street. First off, I'd like to wish Mr. Kendall a quick and full recovery. I'm sorry to hear that.
We do too.
I would like to remind my school committee about your participation in these meetings because you've created a hostile environment. You did, Ms. Hayes, this with Ms. Garcia. This is a us-them, and it's been created from the front of the room. We've already asked, or the taxpayers of Auburn have already agreed to fund the sizable portion of it in the school, which we desperately need. We desperately need it. Now we're talking about another, the superintendent's renewal, which is something that there's a process to. I personally believe that the process has been slowed down because you've all been held accountable, because there is a process. That I believe that the intention of this committee was to fast track this in before possibly there was somebody switching in seats up front. And I would encourage caution and thoroughness, to Mr. Manili's point, to go beyond the anecdotal information that's been solicited and use data points. That there's actually data that we should be holding each other accountable to, and I don't know Ms. Grundon at all. I follow her on Twitter. I enjoy her tweets. This is a potentially, and I will say with all honesty that Ms. Grundon might be the best person to lead Auburn School Department to the next millennium. I don't know. But if you rush this decision and it's the wrong one, and I will tell you as a parent of 2 kids in the Auburn School Department, one of which I pulled out of the Auburn School Department to ensure his quality education, if it's the wrong decision and you fast-tracked it, and my perception is that's exactly what's going to happen, that this will not be a pure process, that it's going to be fast-tracked, and if a new board does take seats up there, or even perhaps you also remain, and there's a decision made that this wasn't the right decision, it's going to cost taxpayers more money. So I would just say, I'm going to hold you all to this, that you got to follow this process that's written out very, very well, and encourage caution, and also to use the data and start just the 5 strengths and weaknesses. That's there's urgency to this as a taxpayer and as a parent of 2 children in the school department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson, and we are not fast-tracking this. We are working through it. It might have been fast-tracked before, but we are not fast-tracking it. We are following the policies and the procedures as stated. Your name, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Karen Matthew. I am a resident of 9 Amberley Way. I have one recent daughter who is a 2019 graduate of EL. I also have a son who's just starting his career, his 4-year career at EL. I'm also an educator. And I think one of the things that is kind of striking me in all of this when we talk about how superintendents are evaluated, as someone who goes through the intensive, and educators behind me can agree to this, the intensive evaluation system that we are put through every single year through, ironically enough, the Marzano system, and eye observation, and all of these wonderful things that Auburn has, the path that Auburn has decided to travel along. There is also, and I'm wondering if the school board is aware of this, Marzano and his cohort Waters have developed an evaluation system for leaders. It includes 21 standards, leadership qualities, as well as 63 subcategories. Every one of them has a question to analyze yourself and rate yourself, whether you are developing all the way up to innovating. It is time-consuming and hours worth, and it provides data with which we are then given a student effectiveness rating. Rather than reinvent the wheel, if Auburn is staying the path with Marzano and this teacher evaluation, if we are being held to those standards, why are we not asking our administration to also follow the same evaluation system? It makes no sense. Looking through your evaluation system currently is extremely subjective. There should be no subjectivity. We have been guaranteed that Marzano takes the subjectivity out of it. When administrators walk through with their iPads and their eye observations, and they can click off all of the elements that they are seeing, why are we not also asking that of our administrators and of our superintendent? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to speak?
Again, hi.
Hi.
I'm Victoria Langelier. I live at 217 3rd Street in Ward 5. And I have a question and a statement afterwards. Is there anything by the Department of Education through the state of Maine that requires you to review policies on a regular basis when it comes to everything from evaluation to any other policies that the school department has? I ask this because I'm ignorant to the fact of education, but I'm not ignorant to the fact of corrections. I am a 14-year veteran of the Androscoggin County Jail, and the Department of Corrections requires us annually to review all policies to make sure that the inmates are safe and all laws are being followed. Shouldn't we do the same for our children?
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. Mike Martell. I'm a resident of 33 Beaver Road here in Auburn. all 3 of my children are in the Auburn School Department. Couple thoughts, and I think sometimes it's valuable to be blunt. I like what you did here tonight. I'm glad you changed the timeline. I don't think we need to be patting ourselves on the back if I'm sitting in your seat, Mrs. Hayes. What you and Mr. Kendall and whoever else was involved in terms of fast-forwarding this timeline was really shameful. And I don't mind saying that. You violate public trust when you participate in that kind of gamesmanship, and it makes the situations we have in this city far worse. And so I'm glad to see you back on track, but as a citizen, as a voting citizen, as a tax-paying citizen, come on. You know, what you did here was way out of line. I'm glad to see it being back on track, but someone needs to call you out on that. It's shady behavior. You're using a timeline that was established in 2002, and now tonight everyone's getting it for the first time, and they're like surprised. Come on, I can't imagine running a business or any other professional organization this way. It's disappointing. I'm disappointed as a taxpayer and as a citizen, and I have no problem calling you out on that. The last thing I'd like to add is, as Auburn citizens, we have a right to expect a fully functioning school department, a fully functioning school board. I don't think anyone in this room is naive. I don't assume that any of you are naive. We can all say, well, it was a mistake, timeline, this and that. Let's face it, let's not be naive. We know it's gamesmanship. As it relates to the evaluation, and I don't know Katie Grondin, I'm in no position to evaluate you. That's not my expertise. That said, when organizations struggle, the problem is almost always leadership. And sometimes we got to take a look in the mirror. And I've been a part of many organizations, as many of you probably have. And I do hope that that look in the mirror and the reflection on leadership is evident both in Katie Grondin's evaluation, and I trust that it'll be evident in the polls in November. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Anybody? Mr. Thistle?
Hi, Scott Thistle, 75 Shepley Street. I have two kids in school, one at EL and one now at the middle school. And I would just say that widespread, just to give you a frame of reference for how outdated your policy is and how outdated your job description is, that widespread access to the internet came around in 1991. If you guys remember, you had a dial-up and, you know, all these funny noises. And so 4 years later, we established a job description for our superintendent of schools. We're still using that job description. And then just to follow on a few of the other things, you know, just keep that, that seems to be a little bit behind the times, hate to say it. But, and then just to follow up on some of the things that other folks in the audience have said already, to use an old like adage of, the teachers have this very cumbersome, convoluted, rigorous, we talk a lot about rigor in our schools. They have a very rigorous evaluation process that they go through when they go through that process. So I would just ask, if it's good for the goose, why isn't it good for the gander? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak at this time? All right, at this time, I'm closing discussion on this, and we will proceed with the next item on the agenda.
I have to move to get my
You gotta
computer.
move?
Yeah.
So we'll just take 2 minutes and let the superintendent move.
Thank you.
You're all set?
Yeah. Okay, so I was asked to put together some information about teacher retention, and so I'm going to give some information to you, and then you can ask questions. So I provided data in the packet for this evening, and so then I put it in a chart. Just to be clear on the positions that are covered in this data are the positions in the AEA teacher contract. So that's guidance counselor, speech pathologist, librarian, music, classroom teachers. It's not just classroom teachers, it's all positions in the teacher contract. So I want to be clear with that. So you can see from 2011 to 2019, what I did is the percent of turnover, and then, of course, then what's the percent that was retained, and then how many retired that year and how many resigned. And then we did have 2 teachers that were deceased, and in 2011 there was a reduction in force, so that is noted in 2011. So I wanted to note to you what the retention rate is. We also, when we looked at the data, some of the resignations were probationary teachers. As you recall, the years, we have 3 years of probationary status, so that's something we noted. And then the retirees. So you can see that we were at 95%, at a low of 89%, and then this year, past year, is 93%. Reasons for leaving, so when a teacher says they're leaving, the administrator checks in with them. We don't have a formal exit interview process. So this is what the teacher shares with us. These have been reasons to teach closer to home, an increase in pay, moving to administration roles, may not be a match for Auburn through the evaluation process. So we do, as Karen Mayu pointed out, we have a rigorous evaluation process for teachers. And so through that process, if a teacher may be struggling or having difficulty or may be considered for non-renewal, a teacher can choose to resign. So you wouldn't see where there would be possibilities of that in this data. Also, we've had a couple of teachers return to the high school. They were students, and so they had opportunity. We had a teacher changing teaching position. For example, a different grade level or different teaching assignment, moved to a school district that would be a fit for them. And we've had some leave the profession. I did last year when I was asked for this data last year, I did reach out to districts, 7 districts responding. I had Ross Walton reach out, and so the 7 districts with this data are Lisbon, Falmouth, Bangor, RSU 16, RSU 4, Yarmouth, SAD 17. We did reach out to Lewiston, and at the time they were still in the middle of hiring, so they weren't able to give us the retention rate. So the retention ranged from 77% to 93%, and we were at 89%. The 3 districts with the higher retention rates also have higher pay scales, making a connection there. The good news this year was we had 100% retention of teachers at Fairview School and Washburn School, as well as our RETC SOS regional program. Washburn had, had a history of turnover due to, the challenges of the school, of which they have been doing a lot to address. And one of their goals was to retain their teachers. So for their school improvement grant last year, they had a teacher supporting new teachers as an instructional coach and really working and supporting and checking in with. And so that truly made a difference. The principal meeting regularly with the teachers to support, what might their needs be. And so they were very pleased to have 100% of their staff returning. And Fairview also retained as well. We also had 3 previous Auburn teachers return to teach this year. We've had Auburn ed techs moving into teaching positions. We've had Auburn parents who were in other districts move into Auburn. And this year, we had experienced effective teachers who were choosing Auburn from other districts. So looking at the positives, people, it wasn't at new teacher orientation, it wasn't brand new teachers. It was veteran teachers and some newer teachers. So those have been the changes. Do you have questions?
Questions? Elfrida?
First, thank you very much for this report. I know I asked for that, and I believe Bob and Neely did as well. Brian, did you ask for that too, or was it just Bob and I? I think you might have, I think you asked about assessments, probably.
Right.
So thank you for that, and thank you for your honesty in reporting that out. I too put my little, my little chart together. That's how my mind goes when I consider things before I come to the meetings. And there's just a few things that I wanted to mention. I had similar statistics as you did. I support our dedicated and skillful teachers, and I really believe that we need to continue to look at this and act on what these statistics tell us. And I know you have various reasons for that. And but without a formal exit interview, we really don't truly know the reason for leaving. And my suggestion is to look at an anonymous survey be sent. I mean, people have a hard time putting their names down to something. They may truly feel, you know, that they want to let people know, but they don't want to know who they are, and that's okay. If, let's say, 50-some-odd people have left, and we get results back from, let's say, 45 or so because it's anonymous, then at least we'll have a lot of information to look at. And taking a look at that, sometimes it's a hard thing to do, but you know what? That's good, because then we can say, okay, this is an issue, we're not sure what the other issue is, but look at those factors that help us improve on what we're doing. I looked at the average of our staff members that we have in the course of from 2009 to 2010 all the way through 2018-19, and we average about 318 teachers, and it's pretty consistent. I didn't have the number for the 2018-19, but of that, over the 10 years, if you just total it, it's another way of looking at it, 174 teachers had resigned, which is 54.7% of those 318 teachers. So that's, to me, that's like, you know, half, a little more than half when you take a look at that, when you look at over the 10 years. So that's just another way of looking at that. And the other thing is 65 of them retired, and they can retire for various reasons, so that's roughly 20.4% who've retired over the last 10 years. Chairman Kendall did say, he commented that like a 12% attrition rate every year is the norm, but I don't agree with that, because 12 out of 100 on an annual basis, if they're to leave, that's a lot, 12% of them. I would like to see that, you know, go much lower than that. And following that, I did ask for a subsequent report, and that is from in regards to our students. So we have teachers who are leaving, but do we have students leaving? And I know you're going to prepare another report for that, and that would be very interesting to see. Who's going to private schools, charter schools, homeschooling, that kind of thing. I guess my message is I want our people to stay here. I want our teachers to stay here, and I want our students to stay here, and I know you do too, we all do. So what's going to keep them here, and what do we need to do to make that happen? And that's part of the problem solving that we do collectively, along with input from our constituents. So I really, truly appreciate this report. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so some of the things we've been putting in place is meeting with the new teachers. Michelle McClellan and Shelley Mogul have set up more meetings to talk about what's going on, what support do they need. I've been following up on last year, for example, at teacher orientation, they set some things that they were going to do for what, you know, how will they make an impact, and following up with an email to them, you know, sharing, so that relationship building, checking in, going to their classrooms, like at EL today, when I was up there checking in with new teachers, how's your year going? How are things working? What are your needs? And so trying to do that on a more regular basis to really make people feel connected, listening, and so forth about keeping them. Because what we did notice is, hiring teachers, like you said, you count up in 50%. Well, it's not in 2011, we had a certain number of teachers, and half of those have left.
Right,
No.
not annual. I
Right.
said collectively, if you take a look over the
Right.
years.
So looking at probationary teachers and why they are not staying, are they seeing Auburn as a stepping stone to going to a different district where the
That
pay is
happens.
more?
Yeah, that
Right?
happens.
Or do we need to support them more in their success so that they do stay with us? So yes, we talk about how to do more with that. And our retreat this year was really talking more about what we can do to continue to improve around teacher voice and feeling valued. So continue to talk about those strategies.
Relationship building is crucial, and I like to come around again and say, let's look at those two things. The a formal exit interview, I've been involved in that, and I think that works really, really well. And anonymous surveys, if they don't want to do an exit interview, give them an option, that kind of thing. So, if you need some help with that, I've done that, and I would be very happy to help, and I think that would give us some good information. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions tonight concerning this? Okay, thank you, Katie.
You can pass that down if you want.
Any discussion from the audience on this? Questions, any concerns? Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. My name is Dave Simpson. I live at 302 Lake Street. I want to ask you that, is it fair to say that the reasons for leaving is anecdotal at best? That you can't support this with any data?
I can support
don't have a
it's a verbal discussion.
Process out the door while you're leaving, hey, I get a better opportunity, whatever. I really do, because I think sometimes that exit interview can maybe guide policy and practice. Maybe they could reveal better practice. And does this data alarm you? I mean, it's trending upwards. Like, who's advocating for these teachers who are leaving? Retirement, that's fantastic. I mean, that's my goal.
Me too.
But it's alarming to me, and my question is it alarming to you, and what, if anything, is being done to engage these teachers to stay? There's an investment that's being made, and I'm guessing, so 2019, we've already had 24 people leave. That means you have to bring 24 brand new ones in, and I'm presuming, and I don't know this, there's a salary structure, so we might be replacing a salary here with somebody here. Is this cost saving? It's alarming to me, and my question to you all is, who's advocating for these teachers before they leave
Right.
this? Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Scott?
Just to follow on Dave said, I think it's stunning that we don't have an exit interview process for our public school teachers here in Auburn. That's just, I think every job I've ever left, willingly or unwillingly, there was an exit interview process, including when I left the Air Force, when I decided not to re-enlist. I think they wanted to know, why don't you want to make a career out of the U.S. Air Force? What is it? What are you going to do? Where are you going next? That kind of stuff, and it was formal. I mean, first shirt brings you in, you talk about it. And every editor I had when I left, I had publishers bring me in. We had long conversations. There was also human resources. We have a human resources department that will ask you a detailed question that stays anonymous so that you can figure out what's going on with your workforce, where you need to improve. The superintendent said that they've worked to have better relationships with developing support systems for their new teachers. That's great, but what's happening to our experienced teachers? The teachers that that are in the system that you lean on to mentor the new teachers. When they leave, don't you want to know why they're leaving? It's really disturbing to me.
Thank you. Anyone else at this time?
Marissa Morrow, 18 Hillsdale Street. I am a teacher at Edward Little. I can tell you that I have a lot of former colleagues who have left in recent years for various reasons. They might have said it's closer to home, and that may be true. They may be, in fact, closer to home. But they're also making $17,000 more a year. They're also teaching only 5 classes instead of 6. They also have only 70 students instead of 120 students. So while they may give the reason for it's closer to home, there are also a lot of other reasons that are going into their leaving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Laura Garcia, 20 Skillings Corner Road. I actually requested this information, Katie, you remember last August, because at the time I was hearing a lot of stories about teachers, our veteran teachers particularly, leaving the district. It was being reported to me quite heavily by the teachers. So I requested this information, and at the time I wanted, in fairness, to make sure I had the context, so I had asked Superintendent Grondin what the prior turnover rate was before 2010. And while she couldn't give me the actual statistics for each year, in a letter she stated to me that between 2007 and 2009, our turnover rate was 4.2%. And so what we have seen here, as Ms. Fournier talked about, is we have literally tripled our turnover rate. And as I put it, we have gutted our system of veteran teachers, and some of the people that retired early. I was just talking with a teacher last night who was looking at the lists, which I had forwarded because I had them from having requested them last August. And the teacher responded by saying, oh my, I'd forgotten about these names. Oh yeah, oh no, yep, no, I know. They retired early because they didn't want to deal with what was going on in the district, and it was easier to do that than to fight back. I think we need to add to the list of reasons for leaving for some of our teachers is a lack of respect, working conditions that are not reasonable, not feeling supported in their work. I think this is a reality, and if you folks on the school committee are committed to an evaluation process that is thorough, I think we should look at what's happening across the river with the new superintendent in Lewiston. He came in, he was alarmed at the number of teachers that were leaving Lewiston. So he is going back and doing some exit surveys of the teachers that have left. And so I think it would be a worthwhile exercise to go back to 2015, or later if you want, but 2015 and then go forward. You have the addresses of these teachers who left. We can do an anonymous survey, and it would be very informative, and it would help us get better. So I think that that is something that is valuable. It's a valuable tool, and our technology allows us to do it. It can be anonymous, and it will provide you with the data that is lacking here. So I would ask that you do that, whether it's part of the actual official evaluation or not. It's still valuable information that the school committee should have. I agree with Ms. Fournier's count. We have lost over half of our staff in the last 10 years. And I also know that when Superintendent Grondin came in and began implementing MCL and PBL, what I have been told is the teachers were told by Superintendent Grondin to get on the bus or find a different job. And I think some of them have taken her at her word and have gone to other schools, other districts. Finally, I would like to say that last November when we audited or 2017, 2018, when we audited the budget and we had to move money to cover administration costs and special ed, we took $360,000 from general instruction and we moved it over. And at the time, I found that shocking because in May at the budget, I had heard all these discussion about we couldn't afford that, these teachers, these positions that we needed. And then all of a sudden, we had $360,000 left. So I did a couple of FOAs and I investigated. And what I found out and was told is that we neither took away any positions nor added positions, that the extra money in general instruction was the result of our turnover rate. That basically when we lose a teacher who's experienced that costs us $55,000 or $60,000 and we replace them with a new teacher at $35,000, we're making a lot of money on that. The problem is we've invested a lot of money in a veteran teacher. And so we're also losing. So I think that's an important thing. And as you know, in budget this year, the same thing happened. There was a lot of talk about the fact that we couldn't afford a computer science teacher. There was talk about we couldn't afford an ed tech for Walton. We couldn't afford an ed tech for Washburn. It was the city council's fault. It was the mayor's fault. And then, Katie, I wrote to you behind the scenes because I reviewed the budget. And I told you that the money was there because I knew what had happened the year before, that we were holding places for teachers that had left, and we were putting in a salary of $55,500 for each one of those teachers. And we were not going to be hiring teachers at $55,500. And at the next school committee meeting, you came forward, and we added those positions that were needed. You did the right thing, just as tonight you guys have done the right thing. But I'll be honest, I'm getting tired. I'm getting tired of holding our representatives accountable. There's an election in November. This is important to our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to step forward?
Again, Sarah Bartlett, 107 Shepley Street. If I might, and this doesn't exactly have to do with teachers, but if I might answer a little bit of your question. My oldest child, actually, we decided not to go to EL because it was not a good choice for him, and I did actually email Superintendent Grondin and let her know my reasons why, so she should actually have that. And I did leave a message with Mrs. Hayes on her phone, but never got a call back. So, I've been trying to express as a parent, so I don't know if other parents have, but it might be worth checking, and I'd be happy to talk to you anytime.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that.
Anyone else? Okay, at this time, I'm going to close public session, and we're going to move on. Committee reports, do we have any committee reports?
No
Faith?
meeting recently, so it'll be the next week they'll have something to
Okay,
report
Dan,
on. Yeah.
you should be a hot topic with transportation. We all set?
Yeah, no, we didn't have any meetings. We had that other one before that, but.
We're all set, Brian? Okay, good. Let's see. Finance, Faith? No, we haven't met. No. And Pat? Curriculum? Share Center? No, not yet. Okay. Let's see. The Building Committee hasn't met. We'll meet later on this month. Wellness?
Oh,
The
Bonnie,
audit?
Bonnie, I forgot, I just had, well, three Tuesdays a month, we have library meetings, different subcommittees. We're in the process of evaluating our director of library.
Okay, thank you. The Audit Committee, we met a month ago, I believe, and the auditors are here now for both the school department and the city. And I heard that it should be in another week, we should have a meeting, probably, on the end of the audit. All right, we'll see, we'll stay tuned on that one. Negotiations, there's no negotiations. Okay, anything else here at this time?
So your upcoming meeting is September 18th.
September
and
18th.
September 18th at 7 o'clock, and then October 4th, we have a workshop at 6 o'clock before our 7 o'clock meeting.
Bob, you had a question?
And I just would like to reaffirm what the members of the audience have said, which makes a lot of sense, that we should at least do an exit interview with all of these valuable employees who've been with us for a period of time. I think it would pay for itself.
I agree with you, Bob.
Thank you. All right, I'll have a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.